Prof. Halim couldn't make it because of some important meeting for international for funding issues. So he's there, but Dr. Olsen will be representing at the moment.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Olsen.
I think he's they're all in the medical doctor, and he's in the clinic. I think he's in between the clinic. He's joining us.
Wow. Thanks for this. It's great. Right? I'm so excited. I understand I'm talking to a lot of sports science and people who have strong interest in sports today. So I'm in my sports attire, right?
Good.
So to make sure I'm part of the feeling of the ambience of the event. Yeah.
I love the flag there, and then Herbalife Nutrition.
Very proud. Oh, very proud.
I also want to introduce Dr. Hosni, who will be communicating with Sarina and many of us in Herbalife Malaysia. Dr. Hosni Hassan is the Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Sports Science, which is in charge of the research and industry linkage.
Our pleasure to be.
Yeah. And I think Susan is joining us already. Hi, Susan.
Yeah, she did. Hey, hi, Susan. Thanks for joining in.
Dana,
yep. Okay, we hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. Dana just sent me a text. She's having a little trouble with the WebEx, but she's talking to IT, so she should try this in a minute.
Good.
I had a moment there because I had to download an app to run this program. So I also had a moment, but thankfully it didn't need an administrator permission to lock that one. So I'm in there as well.
Yeah, we haven't used WebEx for a long time.
Yeah. Zoom is very popular. Yeah, I'm not sure whether Mahendran, Dr. Anizu, and Dr. Asu whether use Zoom as well, but we use Zoom a lot.
In the university, we don't have a Zoom account for it because we only find the WebEx and Google Meet. Yeah. So
imagine, Mahendra, just what says 8 months ago, we never used this. Today, everyone's using some kind of conference platform, right? It's just
I never even know all these platforms.
Yeah.
It's of COVID-19.
Yeah, it moved everyone to technology this year. This year is sort of like, if you're not on technology, this year you're on technology. It's
Exactly.
It's the technology year. We have to declare ourselves now. And have to be IT savvy as well.
Oh, telefon apa buat?
A good thing is we all managed to dial in, so I guess IT is working well today. Sometimes I get a Unify connection problem. So Dr. Susan, Unify is one of the big internet providers in Malaysia. So sometimes it decides to hang my face and ask me to stop moving and stop talking. Yeah.
That's not a good thing when you're trying to talk.
What time in the US now, Dr. Susan? What time in the US now?
It's 4:37 in the afternoon.
Oh, 4:37. So are you still in the office?
No, I'm at home. We've been home since March.
Oh, okay.
And we are home until the first week in April for sure. And they may extend that a little bit. Things are getting bad again over here. So we're staying safe.
Yeah.
Good for you.
I mean?
How are things at where you are with the kids?
Yeah, in Malaysia, the situation now is getting worse. Every day the numbers increase, so that's why we also, most of our people is work from home now. Yeah, and school also, all school is closed now. Universities also as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the nice thing is we've been able to do a lot more of these, without having to travel. I did an event last night with the Philippines. I did one on Friday, actually with Malaysia. And I did one with Indonesia last week. So, without having to travel, we can reach a lot more people, which is nice.
It's one of the advantage of COVID-19.
Yeah, if there is.
So we can explore everything in terms of ICT. Yeah, you see, we have to do it.
Yes.
No choice.
Yes.
Yes.
I think we are in the live.
From the US.
Morning, evening, Susan. I think we are already getting in the live to the YouTube of UiTM channel. We will start in shortly with Dr. Radin will lead us in the meeting.
Okay.
And we're still waiting for Ryan to join us, yeah?
Dr. Dana, yeah,
I'm
okay.
looking, she says she can.
All right, just to address the viewers on YouTube, hello everyone. Hopefully everybody is in a good state of health, and we are very pleased with the attendees so far, with quite a number of people showing up, showing signs of good interest on today's topic. But again, as I said, we are going to wait for another few minutes to ensure that everyone is here. And also to note for the Q&A sessions revolving our invited speakers later on, it's sufficient to put any inquiries you might have in UiTM's YouTube's channel under the comment section, yeah? So the live chat. So we will have a few invigilators that will select these questions to be brought up to the speakers later on. So just keep that in mind. And again, thank you for the show of interest and patience in waiting. We will be commencing pretty soon. All right, since I think almost everyone is here, so we can actually start. Yeah? So is everybody ready?
Sure.
All right.
Very good.
Yes. Wonderful. So a very good morning to everyone. Well, depending on where you are now geographically, it is now 8:44 a.m. here in Malaysia. So let's not keep you waiting any longer. And with that, I would like to welcome all our panelists as well as participants for today's webinar entitled Workout Supplement and its Myths and Facts. My name is Radin Rafidin from Universiti Teknologi Mara, and I will be emceeing today's webinar. So a quick look at the tentative of the webinar. Apart from our highlighted speakers, we will also be joined by the representatives from MASM and MESSA later in the session. So do make sure that you stay till the end of the session. And again, as I said, I would like to remind the participants during the Q&A sessions, after the speakers have completed their presentation, to post any questions you might have in UiTM's YouTube channel under the live comments. Yeah, we will try to cover as much questions as we can within the limited time frame. First and foremost, I would just like to show an enormous gratitude to our fellow organizers, Universiti Teknologi Mara, UiTM, the Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine, MASM, the Malaysian Exercise and Sports Science Association, MESSA, as well as the supporting effort by Herbalife Nutrition. It would not be possible without the efforts of these groups, yeah? So in today's webinar, we are going to debunk a few myths and facts of workout supplements. So it's going to be an engaging, myth-busting, interesting day indeed. So to start, I would like to call upon the Dean of the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, Universiti Teknologi Mara, Associate Professor Dr. Mohad Anizul Muhammad Noor, to deliver the welcoming speech. Please, Professor.
Very good morning, everyone. Thank you, our MC, Dr. Radin Rafidin, for your kind introduction. First and foremost, I would like to take this great opportunity to say thank you very much to the organizing committee for giving me this chance to deliver a welcome speech. A very good morning and good evening to all who attend this webinar session. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for taking the time to attend this webinar today at Universiti Teknologi Mara UiTM YouTube channel. Welcome to UiTM Shahram. I utmost thanks to Herbalife Nutrition Malaysia, especially Mr. Stephen Chin, the General Manager cum Director of Herbal Nutrition Malaysia, and his team members for working together with us, the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, the Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine, MASM, as well as Malaysian Exercise and Sports Science Association, MESSA. Thanks for bringing the excellent speakers with a good topic for discussion from Herbalife Nutrition United States of America, namely Ms. Susan Bowerman, the Senior Director, Worldwide Nutrition Education and Training Herbal Nutrition, and Dr. Daniel Ryan, the Director, Sport Performance and Education of Herbalife Nutrition. I also take this opportunity to thank personally to Lieutenant Colonel Associate Professor Dr. Abdul Halim Mokhtar, the President of the Malaysia Association of Sport Medicine, MASM, for being a co-organizer for this event. Unfortunately, due to an important international meeting, he cannot be with us today, but MASM is represented by Dr. Olsen Chong, the Honorable Secretary with us now. Welcome, Dr. Olsen. Thanks for your support. My sincere thanks to Associate Professor Dr. Hasbullah Ismail, the President of Malaysia Exercise and Sport Science Association, MESSA, for being the co-organizer of this event. And he is also our Faculty of Sports Science Recreation lecturer. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Sport Nutrition Talk with the support from Herbalife. Congratulations to the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation team for organizing this webinar led by Dr. Hosni Hassan, Deputy Dean of Research and Industry Linkages, and his team members. Enjoy the webinar and ensure that we will have more webinar in the near future for sharing knowledge in sports and exercise science. Join the talk and learn. With that, I end my welcome speech with thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.
We certainly hope that this would be an insightful session indeed. All right, moving on, I would also like to call upon the General Manager and Director of Herbalife Nutrition Malaysia, Mr. Stephen Chin, for his welcoming speech. Stephen, whenever you're ready, the Cyberline is yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Rodin. So good morning, honorable guests, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Anizu, members of the faculty, ladies and gentlemen. Hello from my home. I trust everyone is safe and well in yours or wherever you are. It is my pleasure to say a few words this morning to welcome everyone to this exciting virtual event, our first collaboration with Universiti Teknologi Mara, UiTM, to share some of our expertise with you. You who are our current and future leaders in the areas of sports science and related fields, in our joint efforts today to learn the truth about workout supplements and how nutrition could play an integral role in optimizing human performance. Now, hopefully through this session, you have a better appreciation on the usually overlooked contributing roles of nutrition with the hopes of helping Malaysians bring up your best. I would like to acknowledge the many sports science experts joining us here today from the UiTM Sports Science and Recreation Faculty, the Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine, MESM, the Malaysian Exercise and Sports Science Association, MESSA. Well, welcome to the call. Now, I gather there's also a large number here who are studying in the field of sports science and nutrition, perhaps wanting to know more about how your passion could make a difference after you graduate, where your expertise could be well appreciated. Now, our two speakers dialing in today live from the United States this morning, incredible ladies, perhaps they could inspire you. So do make sure you pay attention to their sharing. Now, certainly we hope through this session, you could also get to know us Herbalife Nutrition a little bit better. Perhaps also through this session slightly unravel why even Cristiano Ronaldo, who we have the pleasure to collaborate with, ensures that he complements his training with targeted nutrition to bring out his best performance. Now, in closing, congratulations to everyone for being here today. In pursuit of learning how to raise your knowledge with the hopes of contributing back to society and making a positive difference. So thank you for giving us Herbalife Nutrition the opportunity today to make a difference. Do enjoy the session. So back to you, Radin.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that very warm welcome. So to further kick off today's session, I would like to introduce you to our panel of moderators. So we have two decorated members from the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, UiTM. So the first one is Dr. Haji Razali Muhammad Saleh, who is a senior lecturer of the faculty and also our ex-dean of the faculty. And joining him is Associate Professor Dr. Mahindran Apukuti, who needs no introduction, a senior lecturer of the faculty and a practicing nutritionist. So without further ado, I am going to pass this to both of you for the introduction of our speakers. And gentlemen, the ball is in your court.
Thank you, Dr. Radin, for a warm welcome. It's a good thing that we are here. Thanks to the Dean and also Stephen for giving us the opportunity to moderate this session. My co-moderator, Dr. Razali, are you in with us? I think have some technical.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, good. Thank you. Okay. We are here to moderate this session. We have two speakers with the title of Sport Nutrition Myths and Facts. Very interesting topic, and I guess we have a very interesting speakers to talk about this whole session, whereby Dr. Dana Ryan and also Miss Susan Bowman. They are excellent speakers. I think, Razali, can you introduce Miss Susan?
Okay, thank you, Mahen. So, our first good speaker here. At the moment, Susan Bowman is a Senior Director of Worldwide Nutrition and Education and Training in Herbalife. So she's a master holder in food science and nutrition from Colorado State University. She's a registered dietitian and got she's a specialist, board certified specialist in sport dietetics, also a certified specialist in obesity and management program, I guess. And also she's a fellow of Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And at the moment, she is a chair for Herbalife Nutrition Dietetics Advisory Board. So I guess, Dr. Mike, without further ado, can we welcome Ms. Susan Bowman, and let's listen what he has to say about supplement, myths and facts.
Thanks, Dr. Razali. Together with this forum discussion will be Dr. Dana Ryan as well. Susan, the ball is in your court, and then you can share the slide if you want to, or I can do that for you as well.
Oh, if you'd like to do it, I'd be happy to turn it over to you. So okay. Thank you.
No problem.
if you don't mind.
Transfer the ball to me, that I can do it. While you are doing it, I will introduce Dr. Dana Ryan, who are excellent speaker. She's the ex-professor from the exercise physiology from California State University of Los Angeles, and she had the working with the nutrition field for ages, and she's also the director of sport performance and education at the Herbalife Nutrition at the moment. I guess with that, I will introduce, give it the ball to Susan. Can you?
Take it. I think it's easier. If you don't mind, is that all right?
Okay. Yes, please. Okay.
Okay.
The only thing, right. Susan, sorry, Susan, for the interruption.
Sure.
The only thing is that you need to. Do you see the ball next to your name in the participant list? Sorry, in the panelist list.
Yep.
So can you drag it to Prof. Mahen, so you can share your slide?
Oh, Susan, you want to do it yourself, or you want me to do it?
Yeah,
she wants to pass it to you, but she needs to drag the ball.
It's actually easier if I do it, if you don't mind. Is that all right?
Yes, please.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We got that straight. Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, so we will go ahead and share, and hopefully you can all see that. All right. So, can you see?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That was just such a warm welcome, and I know Dr. Dana and I are both very, very happy to be here to be able to participate in this. Dana and I have sort of overlapping backgrounds, which is really interesting, and I think this is for us. I think this is really a pleasure for us to be able to spend some time training together. As was mentioned, my background is in food and nutrition. That's where I got my master's degree. And my board certifications come from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and that's the certifying body in the United States that under which I became a registered dietitian. And so becoming a board certified specialist within that body is requires, extra examinations that have to be taken every 5 years. And so I'm double boarded. I have board certifications both in sports dietetics and also in obesity and weight management. I'm also very pleased to have been a part of Herbalife for a very long time. I started as a consultant in 2003, and I have been an employee for the past 6 years. And this is really a wonderful opportunity for us. You know, our sports nutrition market is growing. And as I said, just very pleased to be here with Dr. Dana. So, Dana, I will let you introduce yourself.
Perfect. Thank you, Susan. And thank you guys all so much for being here. Like Susan said, it is an honor to be with you. I think, you know, leaving the academic world several years ago, one of the things I miss most is the interaction with students. So it makes me so happy to hear that there's so many students that we have on with us today. So thank you guys so much for joining. It's very difficult to follow Susan in her introduction, but like she said, we work hand in hand, and it's always such a pleasure to do these trainings with her. My background, I started more on the exercise science side. So I did my master's in kinesiology, sports psychology, and then transitioned into exercise physiology and nutrition as well. So my background, my PhD research, my dissertation was in the effects of vitamin D supplementation on cardiovascular function, inflammation, and VO2. So that's more of the science side. And then I went on and I spent some time at UCLA looking at how do we actually implement effective nutrition education into the community. And so I think something that's really important that we're going to be talking a lot today is this idea of myths and facts, because as you enter the workforce, as you start working with more clients, for those of you that are students, you'll know that you're going to encounter so many different myths. You're going to be faced with a lot of questions where you think, well, that has nothing to do with the science or what I learned in school. And so I think, you know, the topic of this conversation is so important, because I think oftentimes as we're studying, we focus so much on the details of the science, and then we get into the real world, and it's important to be able to have these conversations about what people are reading in popular culture and what are the pervasive myths that are out there. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation and then hear some questions from you guys and understand what it is that you want to learn from us. So again, thank you guys so much for being with us tonight, and I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thanks, Dana. You know, well put. And I think it's such an important point. You know, I've often said that because everybody eats, everybody thinks they're an expert in nutrition because everybody knows what works for them individually. And I can't think of another field that has more myths that have to be busted. So I'm really glad that we have this opportunity to do this, and happy that we're doing this together. Also, of course, a big thanks to Herbalife for helping to support this event today. And, you know, one of the things that we wanted to use as a framework, because it was so interesting, is that recently Herbalife actually commissioned this nutrition myths report among consumers. And what the company did an online survey of 500 people in the general population, and you can see which countries were included, including Malaysia. And it was really interesting because what the report was doing was really asking individuals in the general population about a variety of nutrition topics to find out, you know, what they believed and if what they believed was true or was false. And it just seemed like the perfect framework for this discussion. So what Dana and I decided to do was to use this as the framework, and rather than each of us, you know, presenting independently, we really wanted to just have a discussion between Dana and myself, because although our backgrounds are very similar, I come from a clinical dietetics background, and Dana, of course, comes from a sports performance background. And so it's really approaching the topic, and I think it's going to enrich this discussion much more. So these, you'll see a number of these slides today, and these were taken from this survey. And I've circled, of course, the respondents that we've gotten from Malaysia. And I'm using these as just a discussion point because I think that they bring up so many of the common myths. And so, Dana, the first one we're going to talk about, we see that 66% of the population in Malaysia says that carbohydrates make you gain weight. And I think the first thing that I want to say about that is that we, of course, know, and I want you to get into more detail on this, we know how important carbohydrates are for athletes. But clearly, where carbohydrates have gotten a bad reputation is that, you know, people associate carbohydrates with what I like to call starches. And so they associate them with potatoes and white rice and pasta. And, you know, one of the things I often remind people is that, you know, when you eat vegetables, almost all the calories you eat when you eat vegetables are carbohydrates, but you never hear people say, oh, don't eat vegetables, they're loaded with carbs. So obviously it's the type of carbohydrate that really matters, and that certainly not all carbohydrates make you gain weight. And they do serve a very, very important purpose, not just for athletes, but for everyone in terms of just being one of the primary sources of energy. And I think the issue here, the reason that it's become such a common myth is because when people do reduce their carbohydrate intake, they do tend to lose weight, but that's really a function of cutting out calories, as we know. So this myth, as you can see, it persists. There are some countries where the belief is even higher, but the fact that 2/3 of individuals in Malaysia still believe that in essence, that carbs are not good for you because they're going to make you gain weight, I think is a really important one to dispel. So I'll just speak generally that, as I said, you know, the right types of carbohydrates, when we talk about vegetables, when we talk about fruits and whole grains, that these are the foods that are really actually very nutrient dense and provide a lot of nutrition per calorie, and are, you know, your primary sources not only of energy, but also of fiber, an abundance of vitamins and minerals, as well as phytonutrients. And I think, Dana, maybe that's another thing that you can touch on, is how important these phytonutrients are for athletes in terms of their antioxidant properties.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, one of the things that will become a pattern through the course of this conversation is that there's so many of these myths or these ideas around eating that are for the everyday person. And when they're translated into athletes, you know, we really need different types of fueling around sports, and eliminating one food group is never going to be a good idea. Eliminating carbohydrates, eliminating fats, eliminating proteins, just on a general sense, that's never going to be a good idea. And so I think that that's something to keep in mind, as well as that, you know, a lot of these myths that we're going to talk about, they're kind of for that average person that's trying to lose weight, or they think it's a good way to lose weight, rather than talking in terms of how am I fueling my body around exercise. And like Susan said, carbohydrates are essential for that. You know, not just, you know, carbohydrates as a whole, but when we look at all of the, you know, free radical damage that occurs from exercise, when we're looking at all of the electrolytes that we're losing through sweat, when we're looking at the stress and the demand that's put on the body through exercise, carbohydrates play a role in a lot of different ways. And so this notion that we should eliminate carbohydrates or we should get rid of carbohydrates is something that I hope is like the first thing that everybody can get out of their mind, because it's just one of those things that's so important. You know, that's not to say we all need to go out and eat cookies and cake all day. We need, like Susan was saying, to eat the right types of carbohydrates. But when we do that, they're so incredibly beneficial.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up too, about, you know, the antioxidants. And I think that, you know, that's something that I think people tend to forget, is that, you know, we live in this oxygen rich environment. We have this oxidative stress that takes place, and athletes certainly more as they're doing this, as they're doing cardiovascular type of exercise. And so having a really robust antioxidant defense system is really important. And that's really where the carbs come in, because we have such an abundance of those antioxidants from the healthy carbohydrates that we eat. All right, so we've talked about the weight gain, but, you know, Dana, there's another issue, and this is related, which, you know, people say, well, athletes shouldn't have any simple carbohydrates and sugar. So we've just now talked about the quote, the good ones, the fruits, the vegetables, the whole grains. But I think you and I would both agree that for people who are highly active, that there is a role for simple carbohydrates and a role for sugar. Because athletes do sometimes need to sort of top off their gas tanks, particularly right before they go out for an event. And this is a time when a more easily digested carbohydrate could be useful. And so I think this is, again, one of these issues where when people just make these broad statements that, simple carbohydrates and sugar, no one should eat them, including athletes. And I think it's really important for people to understand that certainly we're not encouraging people to eat an abundance of these, but they do have a role. And, we when we were talking carbs before, I think the other thing we forgot to touch on is that, it is the preferred source of fuel for muscles, but also your red blood cells need carbohydrate and your brain uses carbohydrate preferentially. And so it's really, really important that people get enough. So could you just talk a little bit about the role of simple carbs and sugar? We certainly include some of those in our sports line, in our products, and there's a reason for that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you're talking about, it's hard to just paint broad strokes across everything. And sometimes we want to categorize, these are bad carbs and these are good carbs. But the reality, like you said, is there is a role for these simple carbohydrates, especially when it comes to sports, because we have athletes that they need quick energy. They need to top off that gas tank. And so it's really important that they're not only consuming carbohydrates that have a lot of fiber and that require the body to spend time and energy to be able to access that sugar and that energy. And so it's really important to have some of these simple carbohydrates so that you have that quick, fast acting energy, because like you said, it's the body's go-to. It's the fastest, easiest way for our body to produce energy. And so if we're eliminating that and we're eliminating the ability to have access to that fast acting energy, then it's going to limit our performance.
Yes, absolutely. And I think we even have on the next slide, we have just something that actually illustrates that. And I think that, this is, I love this slide because I think there is this perception a lot of times, we hear athletes talk about this who are not as knowledgeable about nutrition as you or I, or many of the people in our audience. And they say, oh, well, if you just don't eat carbs, then what's going to happen? It's better because you're just going to burn more fat, right? We hear this all the time. So I don't know that this chart needs a lot of explanation, but maybe you can just give us a quick overview here on carbs and exercise.
Yeah, I mean, I love, like you said, I love this graph. And I think that this is a graph that's really helpful, especially if you're starting to work with someone that is an athlete and maybe they're trying to convince you, I know you have a background in nutrition, but I'm telling you I don't need carbohydrates. I think a graph like this is a really great way to illustrate the body's need for carbohydrates. And so you've probably all seen something that looks similar to this. And what this is looking at on the bottom is VO2 max, right? So what you're seeing as that VO2 max increases, the reliance of the body on carbohydrates increases. And so when we're almost at our peak VO2, our body is solely relying on carbohydrates for fuel. We know when we're in the anaerobic state, we have to use carbohydrates for fuel. And so people have this notion that if we don't eat carbohydrates, then we're just only going to be burning fat and then we're just going to be this amazing, lean, ripped machine, but it just doesn't work that way. We need the carbohydrates for fuel. And if we're not having enough carbohydrates, we also run the risk of using protein as well for energy, which we definitely don't want to be, breaking down muscle or anything like that to have to get any energy.
Yeah, that's a really important point. That's what we have always said, that, carbs really kind of spare the protein and allow the protein to do its job. It's just protein is too valuable and you just, certainly don't want to burn it for energy. And there is no guarantee, by the way, that, if people eat less carbohydrate, that they're going to become ripped. I know a lot of people believe that, but, as we've just said, the importance of carbohydrate for fueling activity, if you can't do the activity that it's going to take in order to lean up, then it's just never going to happen, right?
Absolutely. And I think about it too is, you've got to put a little bit in to get something out, right? If you're not putting a little into your system, you're going to limit that output. So would you rather, and we'll get to this, in a second, but this notion that people have of, I'm just going to do a fasted workout, I'm not going to put any carbohydrates in my system, and then I'm going to lose weight. Well, you also don't have the fuel to really get through that workout at a high intensity. And so sometimes those few calories that you put in, that's just really going to help propel you through that workout, which ultimately, we're not going to get into recovery time and metabolism and all of that post workout, but it makes a big difference. So having that little bit of carbohydrates can go a long way.
It does. And I put this one question here. This was another question for our survey because I found it amusing actually, because and you and I were talking about this when we were preparing for this, is that 75% of the respondents in Malaysia said a very low fat diet is the best way to lose weight. And you and I were smiling because we know that if you're on a very low fat diet, the converse of that is a high carbohydrate diet, basically, because if you don't eat fat, you have to eat something. And so even though they believe that, carbohydrates are going to put weight on you, at the same time, they believe that a very low fat diet is the best way to lose weight. And, clearly that the issue there is that just cutting out fat doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to decrease calories. And in many cases, what happens there, those calories are just displaced with other calories. And so it's no assurance. And I think, the other thing is that low-fat diets were very, very popular, 20, 30 years ago. I think they've modulated now because, and we'll get into this in a minute when we start talking about keto. But I think that, people somehow feel that dietary fat is just almost indispensable or is dispensable, that it's not really that important. And yet, it does serve a purpose aside from just making foods more palatable. You do need some fat. There are essential fatty acids, omega-3s and omega-6s, that have to come from the diet. Your body cannot make them. You don't need large amounts, but you do need them. And I think just for people to recognize that small amounts of fat help us absorb fat-soluble vitamins, we have to have some. And so this idea that, you just cut out all the fat and that you're going to, your diet is somehow going to be balanced enough, I think can be really dangerous. And Dana, I don't know, have you run into many athletes who subscribe to a very low-fat diet? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think really the focus is more on like eliminating the carbohydrates. That's more of where we see the trend with a lot of the athletes that we work with. I would say we don't often see this notion of a really low fat diet with athletes. I think sometimes people equate low fat with low calorie and they're trying to restrict their calories in general, but it goes back to what we said at the beginning, which is restricting any macronutrient is not going to be the best way to go. And so I don't think it's not something we see a lot, not like, people trying to eliminate their carbohydrates. That's definitely way more trendy. But I would say what we do see is this idea of the fasted cardio and the fasted workouts and not eating anything in general before you train.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was actually the next myth versus fact. So this wasn't from our survey, but as Dana and I were preparing for this lesson this morning, this afternoon, this evening, this was one of the things that we talked about because there, and we are going to talk about some different methods of fasting, but there is this myth amongst a lot of athletes that if you work out without having eaten, that again, because there isn't really going to be any fuel available, that your body will then just burn fat. And Dana, I think, what I've always found interesting about this whole discussion about fuel utilization for athletes is there also seems to be this idea for people that I think they feel like, you use up all your carbs first, and then once those are all burned out, then you go to your reserve tank and then you start burning fat.
Right.
And of course, you and I know that doesn't work that way, that, you're constantly burning a mixture of fuels. And in fact, truth be told, about, maybe 10% of the calories that you burn in exercise might come from protein. So you are, in fact, even utilizing small amounts there. But I think that this idea that, you can sort of force your body to use one fuel versus another is also sort of all wrapped up into this myth. And, I think for somebody to have a workout, if you're talking about someone who's going to take, excuse me, a walk a mile or two in the morning and they haven't had breakfast, no problem. I'm not really going to worry about that. But I do get concerned about athletes who are going to go into a fairly heavy duty workout and go in a fasted state. So maybe you can talk a little bit too about, why do you think that this is such a persistent belief among athletes, and what really does happen to their performance?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely something that we see a lot. And yes, if you're fasted, maybe you are going to be increasing your fat utilization during training. But like you said, and going back to that graph that we showed with the X, you're always, unless you're basically at your peak VO2, you're burning a combination of carbohydrates and fats all the time. And so this is something that I would never, I mean, if you're in a weight controlled sport and you're working with a sports dietitian and you know exactly what you're doing, it can be a tool on occasion. But for that person that's going to a boot camp or running a marathon or doing really intense workouts, this is not, I think it's not safe. And I think that you're not going to get the best out of your performance. There's just, if you go into a workout fueled or if you go into a workout fasted, then you're going to see a massive difference in your performance. And so I just don't think that there's a real purpose or need to go into a workout fasted, because you're not going to get the most out of that workout. And then if you go into workout fasted, you work out really hard, you burn all these calories, and then oftentimes you're starving when you finish that workout. And so you may not always make the best choices in terms of food after the workout. And so sometimes it's not even about the during the workout part. It's what is then the result afterwards. If you're fasted, you haven't eaten anything, you've burned all these calories, there's a trickle down effect.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a really important point. And I think, we, as a dietitian, it's something I've certainly seen just with the general population, but it's the same concept, which is, you let yourself get too hungry. And then when the time comes to eat, there's a number of things that go on. Number one, as you said, you're so hungry that you may just grab whatever is the first thing that's available. That may not be the healthiest thing. The second thing that happens is that people do sometimes have a tendency to make up for it, because it's to say, well, I didn't eat. I didn't eat this morning, so now I'm entitled to eat more. And so, in essence, I think our whole point in discussing this idea is that for a lot of people, if the goal of doing a fasted workout is to burn fat and to lose weight, it could just completely backfire if you're going to end up just eating more afterwards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also think about, again, the intensity at which you're going to be able to work out, and what is that going to do to your metabolism post-workout? How much more are you going to be able to burn at a higher rate for a longer period of time if you're able to do this really intense workout, as opposed to being fasted, struggle through it? Maybe you're burning more fat during the workout, but what happens to your body afterwards? And so I think it's really important that we think about that as well.
Yeah, that recovery nutrition becomes so important. And, this is another interesting topic because intermittent fasting has become very popular. And so just in the heels of this discussion of just generally people sort of working out in a fasting state, this is something that is even more concerning when it comes to athletes. There are different methods, of course, to intermittent fasting, and I'm sure everybody in the audience is familiar with the concept. But the two most common ways that people are doing this is either what we call the 5-2 program, in which people 2 days out of the week either fast completely or cut down significantly, and then the other 5 days they eat a calorie restricted diet. What I think is more important, and in some ways a little bit more problematic for athletes, is a form of intermittent fasting called time restricted feeding, in which individuals restrict all of their eating to usually an 8-hour window, and then there's a 16-hour period of fasting. And I think that if we're looking at the general population, if people are looking as a means to control calorie intake, I think, this can be a useful tool, but it really, really has to be done carefully. It has to be done right, because obviously you are limiting the number of eating experiences that you have over the course of the day, so that nutrient density becomes really, really a very important factor here. But I think when we start to talk about athletes is where I get really concerned, because, unlike what happens with the general population, the biggest issue for athletes in a lot of cases is they aren't as compliant as they should be with the timing of their meals, when they take in their macronutrients, and that can become a big concern, not just for the immediate workout, but in terms of just preparing for the next one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think when it comes to athletes and when it comes to nutrition, timing is so important. And so if we're all over the place, if we're restricting our diet, if we're restricting our calories, ultimately that's going to be a hindrance to your performance, because we need to make sure that we're fueling ourselves correctly, and then we're also putting the right nutrition into our body after our workout. And so from that aspect, it's a problem. But I think about it from the psychological side as well. I mean, I started in sports psychology, and just this idea of restriction is always very challenging in terms of human behavior and in terms of how we approach things. And like you were saying before, oh, well, I didn't have calories then, so then I can make up for it. And I think it becomes really challenging to continue this pattern of eating over time as well.
It does. It absolutely does. And as I say, my background is, I've got this dual background, and dealing with people who are struggling with their weight. It's the same issue. This is a very, very difficult program to adhere to. And I think that, what we always hope is that individuals who are, let's say, if they are working on their weight and they are getting more activity and they're really trying to get into, to get themselves to their personal best when it comes to weight and activity, that as they move from, let's say, a weight loss individual, and they move more into somebody who's getting more and more activity, if some of those behaviors and some of those mindsets, as you said, continue and carry through as they're trying to become more and more active, it can actually be detrimental to their performance.
We don't want people to be thinking about calorie restriction around their workout. We want to make sure that your workout nutrition is about what your body needs and managing and helping you with the demands and the stress that you're putting on your body. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes we see with people trying to lose weight is they work out and then they don't eat. And so right. Calorie restriction, or even thinking in that mindset around workout, I think is just never going to be beneficial.
Yeah, and I think just from a practical standpoint, if somebody if they're restricting their eating to 8 hours a day, it means, let's say, if they start eating at 10 and they have to stop eating at 6, they lose out a huge opportunity for that nighttime fueling. And I think that, we're going to talk about, bedtime eating, but, it's so important for athletes, as you and I know. So we'll get to that in a moment. Here's another diet myth, and we threw these in there because we do run across a number of people who are following some of these diets. And in this particular case, we asked about alkaline diets. I don't know if in this case, it'd be interesting to really know how many people knew or didn't know. And here we can see 46% of people weren't really quite sure what an alkaline diet is. I imagine those in the audience are familiar with the concept. It's actually been around for over 100 years. But the idea being that you manipulate the foods that you eat so that when they are metabolized, that really what you're left with in terms of the mineral residues in your body, that you are left with a more alkaline residue than a more acid residue. And the thinking is that this is to readjust the pH of your body. Now, needless to say, you wouldn't want to do this, nor should you, even if you could adjust the pH of your healthy body. Your body obviously keeps your bodily fluids within narrow pH ranges for a very, very good reason. So it's faulty logic, number one. But if you look at what the diet recommends, I mean, there's certainly some pluses to it. Alkaline diets do promote a lot of fruit and vegetable intake. But I think the biggest concern for the general population, and certainly for our athletes as well, is that there's a lot of high protein foods that are restricted on this diet. So if you're following an alkaline diet, you can't have nuts or fish or poultry or eggs or lentils or beans or soybeans. And so, protein, which is such an important nutrient, then becomes really, really difficult to get. And I know I asked you, Dana, on the pre-call, if you'd run into this or if you'd run into any athletes who were drinking alkaline water, because I think that was sort of popular a while back. I don't know if it still is.
Yeah, I think of anything having to do with an alkaline diet, it's going to be the alkaline water that we've seen. I think it's moved, at least here in the US, it's moved more towards a mainstream idea and away from sports. I don't see a lot of athletes trying to subscribe to this type of diet. I think we see a lot of people spending the extra money in stores on alkaline water, again, kind of not understanding that the body's going to do a very good job of regulating itself, and it's going to do a very good job, like you said, of keeping it in that narrow pH range for very good reasons. So it's not really a big issue that I think that we encounter these days with athletes. Again, it's more of those restrictive type intermittent fasting, low carbohydrates that we're starting to see. But the one, and I know we're going to get to this next, more than anything, is this idea of juice cleanse or any cleansing of any sort. That's more of an issue than the alkaline.
Yeah, well, go ahead. What do you want to say about it? we could spend a whole hour on this one.
We can keep it short and sweet. It's not a good idea if you're an athlete. Again, your body, I think we have to go back and give our bodies a lot of credit, right? Sometimes we think we have to do all this extra work for our body, but our bodies are amazing machines. Our bodies have a lot of built-in natural processes that are going to maintain our pH, that are going to help cleanse our bodies. We don't have to do a juice cleanse to do that, and it can be dangerous. Again, a juice cleanse, a lot of times, you end up with a ton of extra sugar, right?
Yep.
Or you end up with no protein during your day. And so I think juice cleanses, if you like a good vegetable juice, I think it's great to have during the day, but having that as your diet throughout the day, I think is not good practice.
Yeah, exclusively, that's just not going to work. And I think what you said is so important for us to just remind ourselves.
Susan, are you? Hello? I think she has some technical issues, Dr. Dana.
Okay.
Susan has
I see
just
her
been cut
coming
off.
back.
All right.
Susan.
Right.
Well, so yeah, so like we were saying, are you back, Susan?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Did we lose me?
I wasn't sure if I was talking to myself or if you were gone. So yes.
Oh, all right, we're both back.
We're back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, anyway, what I was saying is that, as you said, just giving the body so much credit, and that, I think that people like to do these things because they feel like it sort of gives them a fresh start. I always say it's like changing the oil in your car. But then if you keep, like misusing your car, it doesn't really help. And so why would you do this? Because I think what people do is they kind of use it as a setup. It's like, well, now I'm all cleansed. And then they just start eating badly again. And it just, I think it just becomes cyclic. All right. Dana, what about this one about eating right before you go to bed?
I think this is another one of those good myths that's out there. It's been around for a long time, but there's also actually a lot of beneficial things that athletes can be doing before they go to bed. And I think one of my favorites is utilizing protein, especially casein protein, before they go to bed. So for a lot of our athletes that are looking to build extra muscle mass, or they need to put on, just good, healthy weight, having a lot of casein protein before they go to bed can be really beneficial. Now, does that mean eating before you go to bed is going to make you gain weight? No, right? It's just really, it comes back to putting the right nutrients in your body and making sure you're understanding the purpose of what it is that you're eating. And so something like a casein protein can really have a big benefit for athletes before they sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when you do explain that to people, I think athletes do, they know dairy proteins are good. They know about whey, they know about casein, but I think when we can give them those other little nuggets of information, so they know that the whey protein is faster acting, which is really a great thing to do, using it as a recovery. But that casein protein, because it's a little bit more slow release into the bloodstream, and because whenever we consume protein, our muscles are stimulated to repair themselves. What a perfect time to do that, but to provide this slow-acting casein protein over the period of time when you're sleeping to allow the body to recover. The other thing that I always like to say about this too is that, your stomach and your body doesn't know what time it is. And so, if you eat too many calories at night or you eat too many calories in the morning, it's still too many calories. So it's not that, it's all this notion that, well, I'm going to eat and then I'm not going to be active and I'm not going to burn it off. And it just doesn't work that way. Again, it's that misunderstanding about fuel. If you put some fuel into storage, you're just going to pull it out when you become active the next time. So I really discourage people who work with athletes from buying into this, and certainly to tell your athletes how important it is to really be sure that you're fueling at the right time, and bedtime can be one of those times to do it. This one is interesting too, because we were talking about protein, and I was really happy to see that they were just having a better understanding of sort of what nutrient needs are for athletes, and recognizing that athletes actually do need more protein than less active people. I think people with athletes, they say, oh, I know carb loading thing that you do. But I think it was nice to see that 72% actually recognize that athletes do need more protein. And again, this isn't for fuel utilization, but this is for muscle repair and muscle recovery. There's a lot of wear and tear that goes on no matter what type of exercise you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I think that last point that you mentioned is really important, no matter what type of exercise you're doing. And I think this is, for anyone that's working with the everyday athlete, like I like to call it, I think this is an important thing to remember. Athletes that are maybe trying to lose weight, or just that person that thinks, well, I'm not a professional athlete, so I don't need protein after my workout. Again, let's go back to the basics of the body. It doesn't matter how fast you are, how slow you are, how strong you are. Your body is still breaking down muscle fibers. There's still the wear and tear on your body. Like I like to say, like, I can go for a run with an Olympic runner. They're going to beat me, but I'm still using carbs and I still need protein to help my body recover. Just because I'm really slow, which is true, it doesn't mean that I don't need more protein. And we have to just, again, this goes back to when we talk about sports nutrition, it's really about making sure that we're meeting the demands of the body that exercise is inducing. Because we spend so much time talking about the benefits of exercise, I think sometimes we often forget it's a stressful occasion for the body to go through a bout of exercise. It obviously has benefits in the long term, but in the acute sense, we have inflammation, we break down our muscle fibers, we become dehydrated, we deplete our body's glycogen stores. There's a lot of stress that happens, and so we do need more, and protein is certainly one of those things that we need more of when we're active.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that this we've got a few slides in here on protein, and we touched on this already. And I was pleased to see that the majority of people do recognize the importance of protein after exercise. And I think that you touched on this so beautifully, in that really talking about what a stress it is on the body, and of course what happens post-exercise as the body's repairing itself. That's how muscles get built. That's how muscles get larger. But if you don't put the right nutrients in at the right time, it makes it really difficult. And so if people are, what we say, burning the candle at both ends, if they're breaking protein down through the process of exercise and then they're not refueling properly, then, where is the body going to get the amino acids that it needs to do all the things it needs to do? And I think this is a good time to remind people that protein has so many other functions in the body. I think everybody associates it with muscle, but your hair and your skin, your nails, the proteins that circulate in your bloodstream, the hemoglobin that carries oxygen to your cells, that's a protein. You have to have protein in your diet in order for it to do all of that, all of those important functions. And so, as we said, if you just are not providing your body with what it needs, then post-exercise, you've kind of defeated the whole purpose, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the issues is when we call it sports nutrition, oftentimes our brain again goes to that professional sport and that professional athlete, and they think like, okay, well, this athlete, well, they have this really long season and they need to protect their body through this long season and they have to recover properly. But then I think about all of us that are the everyday athlete, and we don't have a sports season, but our season is the rest of our lives. Our season is being able to train day in and day out for as long as we possibly can, for as many years as possible. And so having the right recovery and the right nutrition after our exercise is going to allow us to work out and train for a lot longer.
I love that concept. I love that concept of just the season of life of exercising. It's really great. So we do have to talk about protein powders. That is we do have a lot of protein in our products, and and a variety of proteins in our products. And I think it's really important to talk about this because we've touched on a couple things with protein. Obviously, the importance of it. We've talked a little bit about people who might not get enough protein if they, for instance, are on an alkaline diet, or suppose we have people who might be vegetarians or vegans. And these are individuals, for example, who really can benefit, I think, from using protein powders in order to get the amount of protein. I think particularly that not everybody has the same protein needs, which I think is another thing we haven't really talked about. But there are differences in body sizes, and so one of the things that you and I talk about often is that when we see dietary guidelines that say, well, all women need a certain amount of protein and all men need a certain amount of protein. Well, not all women are created equally, and men, same thing. We have people of all different sizes and shapes, and so clearly their protein needs are different, the amount of muscle mass and lean body mass that they have to support. And so being able to do that and being able to kind of personalize the amount of protein that they need, this is where protein powders can be, I think, particularly useful. So could you just say a few words about this? Because I think it's important for people to understand. I think there's some people think, it all has to be outcome from diet, but this definitely has a place.
Oh, no,
sorry,
absolutely.
Dr. Dina. Sorry for the interruption, but due to time constrictions, would you be able to wrap your presentation, Susan and Dr. Dana?
Yes.
And
Sure.
ultimately highlight on the take-home message of the presentation. And we would
Sure.
cover this extensively during the Q&A sessions later on. Thank you, guys.
Of
Sorry about
course.
that.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So I'll just say a couple words on this slide. I think, one of the things that Susan was talking about is not everyone is created equal. And also your protein needs yourself can change over time. As soon as you're building more muscle, your protein needs change. Protein powder, certainly very, very important, especially from the convenience factor of getting that timing of having good quality protein after your workout.
Okay, Dana, you and I, we've had so much to say. So let's do one more, and then I think we'll wrap up very quickly. But I do want to just touch on hydration a little bit, and just this idea that everybody can just do with water, or that the idea that you can't drink too much. I know there's a lot to say, but if you could just say a few words about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think my take home with hydration is it's very important to replace what you're losing. So as you're exercising, you're not just losing water, you're losing electrolytes, you're depleting your body's carbohydrate stores. So you have to replace what you're losing to help your body stay on top of what it needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can drink too much. I mean, you can definitely drink too much water and dilute those electrolytes. And by the way, let me just go back very quickly, I just want to remind people that that caffeine is hydrating, and caffeine it does serve a purpose in sports, and that people who are not caffeine sensitive can absolutely use it and count that towards their fluid intake. All right, so I think to wrap this up, I think this is really the best myth of all. It doesn't matter what I eat, I'll burn it off with exercise. And Dana, I think you and I would both agree that, there is this perception, I think, among athletes that, I'm active, I'm burning it off, so who cares? It's, it's calories or calories. And clearly it's the quality of the calories that really matter. And I think that's really our take-home message, is that your diet has to be well balanced, that you have to eat nutrient dense foods, and just, people who are very young and very active and think it doesn't really matter. I just need the energy. it's like putting bad gas in your car. I mean, you want to put the premium fuel in so that you can get the best performance, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think
Okay.
that's a perfect note to end it on.
Perfect note to end it on. All right. Well, so let me do that. Let me stop sharing. And Dana, that was really fun. We we were worried we might not be able to fill up 40 minutes, and there you go. We just got going. So, Radine, we'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Dana. That very interesting topic from the macronutrient up to micronutrients. You have covered up the up to water, and you well said about the what food that help you. Definitely, sports. You need a nutrition to handle every single thing. That's a well mentioned about the nutrient importance here. How nutrition is very important for an athlete. We do have some questions coming up in the YouTube for speakers. We can share it now.
Sure.
Can Susan, can you transfer the ball to me?
Oh, sure. How do I do that? I just drag it, right?
Yeah,
Just
drag
drag
it up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, who am I? I'm dragging it to Radine.
To Mahindra.
Okay, here we go. Let's see. Yes.
Brilliant.
There we
Okay.
go.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay. There is my PowerPoint. You can see. Well, there's a wide range of questions from all kind of folks or people from the YouTube. They're asking, I think they tend to understand the brown rice and the basmati rice, how these low carbs help to replace the plain rice. What's your take on this?
Okay, so I could take that one. I think the issue there, what we're talking about is there are so many different types of rice, and different types of rice have a different glycemic index.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that they're lower in carbohydrates necessarily, it's the rate at which those carbohydrates are digested. And so brown rice, because it's whole grain, because it has the germ and the bran and everything, it's digested more slowly, which means that the carbohydrates are released into the bloodstream more slowly. And so those low glycemic index carbohydrates and low glycemic index rices are considered better. And certainly from an athlete standpoint, as a post-workout food, I would say those kinds of things would be great, because we don't recommend high fiber foods right before a workout, but as a post-workout and as recovery, it's great. I just would say that the calorie difference between brown rice and white rice is not significant. So there's still calories there, but certainly a better quality of calories with the low GI.
Well said, Susan, because GI will need to play a role, and then sports, even though GI mainly used for the diabetic initially started, but we are looking at in sports for the low GI and high GI food and everything. And when you talk about GI, I would like to know about your stand on GL, glycemic load as well.
Sure. Well, the load is actually really more significant than the index, frankly. I think the idea is really for people to look at the glycemic load of the diet overall rather than looking at individual foods, because there are a lot of foods that are healthy that have a high glycemic index but a very low load because the total amount of carbohydrate per serving is low.
Yeah.
Watermelon being the best example I can think of. And so I'm sure most people understand how glycemic index is established. And so the load is really what matters. That said, Dana, you may want to chime in here. There is a role for high GI foods for athletes.
Yes.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And we touched on this a little bit. And I think, just in the interest of getting to all of these questions, I think absolutely there is that role for those high GI carbs right before that workout to really, top off the body's gas tank.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Because I think the next question that in the line is the weight loss become media, and they are looking at all kind of food. I think you have mentioned about it. There is a lot of myths there, and we have to understand the science first then before you apply with the weight loss strategies and everything. And the third question, we are still coming back to low carb or either no carb at all. I guess it's a very good trend that we all answered it very well in the presentation. Talk about nutrition in sports. You need the glucose. You need the carbs. So you can't run away. And you mentioned about vegetable and fruits and vegetable. You can't say no to that because you need that. I think yes, Susan.
I mean, that's exactly right. Is that I think, as I said, I think people forget when they talk about carbohydrates, they think of starches, they think of things that are highly refined, but they forget that there's so many good carbohydrates there. And I think that, we didn't touch on keto diet, which is another very popular one, and it's wildly unbalanced. It's 75% of the calories are coming from fat, which is just is just ridiculous, and it just really does not allow for anywhere near an adequate amount of carbs. But Dana, I'm sure you probably run into athletes who are trying to follow a keto diet as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the intermittent fasting, low carb, and keto are the ones that we see all the time. But I just wanted to point something out on the second question is, how do we avoid this idea of just like really stressing the weight loss? And I think it comes back to finding different ways to get away from measuring just the number on the scale, right? Tracking your fitness, you're going to find your energy levels go up, you feel better, your body composition changes. So really encouraging people to measure body composition changes rather than simply the number on the scale, because we know that that's incredibly misleading and can lead to a whole host of problems. So focusing on measuring fitness and measuring body composition rather than just a number on the scale, that can really help with this kind of mania to find the right number.
That's so important. We call those non-scale victories, all of those things that people experience. And you and I have counseled people before where they will say, my clothes are fitting better, but the scale's not moving. But the thing is, they're losing fat, they're gaining muscle, but they are slaves to the scale. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, it's good thing that we talk about body composition, because 20 years ago there's nothing much about body composition. Now everybody are looking at it. I think you can get access to body composition to check your lean mass and muscle mass, how much is it. I think that's a very good science there to talk about as well. I think they need to know what body composition all about, not by just weighing body weight only per se.
Yeah, it's absolutely right, because we have become too accustomed to looking at charts that are just show us height or weight or using BMI, and we just we don't really subscribe to using body mass index. It doesn't really tell you anything. We all know that athletes in general who are heavily muscled have high BMIs, and we know they're not over fat. And so we have to kind of get away from that mindset, and we have to teach people that, reaching an appropriate body composition, appropriate level of body fat is much more important than what the scale says, and certainly much more important than what a BMI chart would have to say.
And it can be very discouraging, right? I mean, I think, personally back to when I was a gymnast and I was, 12 years old and I was, all muscle, but the doctors told me I was high on my BMI was too high. And it's like, no, I just had a lot of muscle then. So I think it can have a lot of detrimental effects as well. So that's something to pay attention to.
Thanks. Yeah, that's true. Dr. Razali, yeah.
Sorry for interrupting the domain. So I just wonder when I look at the data that you presented just about the nutrition myth among population in Asian regions. Did you compare with this data with the European or any other Western countries? So if you compare, so what's the final?
No more scientific.
Yeah, what's the outcomes of the are they better than the Asian people in terms of the this misconception, perception of nutrition?
I'm not sure I heard the question. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Can somebody repeat the question?
I mean, did you compare the data that you get you got from the survey? You compare with you compare those data with the European countries, people from Europe, people in the US.
Oh, I think, Susan, what he's asking is it the survey that you have shown earlier for all of us, even comparable to, did you compare with the European data? Do you have any European data on that?
I'm not aware of any European data, but it would be interesting to see. Dana, I know you've done some work with some of our athletes in Europe, and also just work with just the general population over there. I think that their level of knowledge about nutrition might be a little bit better. Would you expect that they would sort of come out a little bit better on the survey?
Because I surprised when I saw the data from Japanese people. If you look at these people, which is a developed country, Japan is a developed country. So it looks like their level of misconception of nutrition is quite high.
Yeah.
I wonder why. It's people in a developed country. So that's why.
I would say part of it. I think in certain countries in the Asia Pacific region, particularly among women, they are not too keen on exercise in general. There's a very common misperception that women believe that if they exercise, they'll get big, they will get very bulky, and so I think that's part of it. I think that there is some cultural. Would you agree with that, Dana?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I would say though, the trends I think are very similar around the world, and I would say it may even be more extreme if you came to the US and you asked about a low carbohydrate diet or some of these really trendy diets. We've had a lot of documentaries and things like that have very interesting one-sided data that are presented in very convincing ways. And so I think that a lot of these conversations are making their way into mainstream media more with a lot of inaccuracies, and that's in turn resulting in a lot of these, I need to be on a low carbohydrate diet, I need to do intermittent fasting. And so while maybe there's a difference in baseline nutrition knowledge, I think people buying into some of these fads, we certainly see it a ton here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks, Dana and Susan, for that questions. We have a few more, and then we have to wind up already because it's getting to 10 o'clock. I believe, Dana, you have another meeting to attend. Well, on the question 4, they're looking at the power gel and gel consumption. What's your take on these? I think, Dana, you have worked with athletes. I believe they have taken power gel and gel consumptions.
Yeah, especially for triathletes, this can be a really powerful tool, especially they don't want to eat and you're in the middle of an Ironman triathlon. You're not going to sit down and have an entire meal. So having these gels that are very high in carbohydrates can be a really beneficial tool. Some of them now have the caffeine and carbohydrates. I think right. that for the right type of sport, again, you're going for a walk around the block, you don't need a gel. Right. Yeah. But if you're doing these Ironman triathlons and things like that, they certainly have a role.
Indeed. I did try power gel when I was mountain climbing, and it's very important and it's very useful actually because you can't carry food and everything. Yeah. And then the others, I think, is ideal body weight. I guess I think you have put it very well in the presentation. You have spoken about, and if you want to lose weight, how should focus on diet, controlling meal. I guess it was, they find jogging is hard for them to exercise. I think exercise is important, equally as the diet. I think Susan and yourself, Dana, you have put it very well on this part. Both use hand in hand. You can't run away from one or the other side. And
you can't, part of it is that, it's very hard if you're trying to lose weight. Let's say if somebody has to create a 500 calorie a day deficit to lose a pound in a week, it's very hard to cut 500 calories out of your usual diet. for the day, just as it's very hard for most people to burn off 500 calories, but you can easily, through a combination of diet and exercise, create that deficit.
Sure.
And I will say real quick on the person that mentioned that they don't like running, I'm with you 100%. I'm not a fan of running, and that's okay. Just find whatever type of exercise you like to do. Maybe it's dancing, maybe it's cycling, maybe it's swimming, maybe it's hiking. It doesn't have to be what your best friend likes to do or your husband or your wife. Just find whatever type of exercise you like to do and do that, and that's perfect.
No monotonous kind of exercise. You can have a variety of type of exercises and everything. Well, there are plenty more questions coming up, but we come to an end to this session, and I think I have to wind up in this question number 7: ideal amount of time, intensity. I think they can work it out with the exercise therapies. This because this is more on nutrition angle, and protein supplement after cardio. What's your long-term effects? I think you have mentioned about it in your presentation, how the meat on the protein, you can take it at the nighttime, and the casein and whey protein as well. I think it's already mentioned. I have to thank, and I have to running out of time. I have to keep in time on that. I will pass it to Radin, our MC, to take over you for the next session, for the closing remarks. Thank you, Dana, and thank you, Susan, for a very wonderful presentation from both of us, Dr. Razali and myself. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. That's unfortunate that we don't have time to cover all the questions, but nevertheless, great session indeed. So thank you again to both our speakers and moderators for that very informative and productive session. So from what we've heard just now, it's safe to say that some of the major myths, or should I say misconceptions, regarding on how to diet, what is the good and bad nutrition, and caloric restrictions, and etc., has been clarified. So don't be afraid of carbohydrates. Hopefully we can all have a peace of mind now, knowing how knowledge in nutrition and supplements should be used, whether it's in a high performance program or for your average general consumption. And on that note, I would like to welcome the president of the Malaysian Exercise and Sports Science Association, MESSA, Associate Professor Dr. Hasbullah Ismail, for the closing remarks. Professor, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Radin. On the behalf of the Malaysian Exercise Science and Sports Association, MESSA, we would like to thank speakers for the very interesting topic today, Dr. Dana Raya and Dr. Sulan. We would like to thank the organizer, Faculty of Sports Science and Recreation, UiTM, Malaysian Association of Sports Medicine. Thanks for the supporters, Herbalife Malaysia, for bringing in 2 excellent speakers on sports supplement, which is current topic for all active individuals that includes top-notch athletes. MESSA is honored to be part of this talk. It's a win-win situation for all of us for the betterment of the athletes. Hope all attendees will get benefit from this talk. All of you are also invited to join MESSA. Please contact us for further detail on MESSA. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you, Prof. To further conclude our session, I would like to pass this on to Dr. Alston Chong Wai Kwong, the Honorary Secretary for the Malaysian Association of Sport Medicine, MASM. So, Doctor, whenever you're ready, you can take the lead. Dr. Alston, are you there?
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
Warmest greetings to from the Malaysian Association of Sport Medicines. I'm Alston Chong, the Honorary Secretary of Malaysian Association of Sport Medicines, MASM. First and foremost, on behalf of MASM, I would like to express my utmost gratitude to our 2 wonderful speakers today from the United States, which is Miss Susan Bowerman and also Dr. Dana Raya, for giving such a insightful and also delightful sharing about the myths and also the facts of workout supplements, which is very important not only to athletes and also to people like us that are taking supplements but without having much knowledge. And secondly, I would like to thanks to the main organizers of this webinar, which is the Faculty of Sports Science and Recreations, Universiti Teknologi Mara, and also our core organizer, which is Malaysian Exercise and Sports Science Associations, MESSA, for their countless efforts in collaborating and make this webinar a successful one. And last but not least, I would like to thanks and my deepest appreciation to all the audience for your time in listening and participating and answering questions and joining us this morning. We hope this webinar is informative and worthwhile, and we hope to see you again in our future event. And last but not least, stay healthy, stay safe, and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you again, Doctor. Thank you. So thank you again to both representatives for the closing remarks. And with that, it brings us to the ending of our session. Again, I would like to thank all our panelists for making this possible. A million thanks to our speakers, Susan and Dr. Dana, for that very informative input. And I would also like to thank our participants, and hopefully this webinar has been an eye-opener and could aid you irrespective of your fields. Ultimately, this would not be possible without the organizers, UiTM, MASM, MESSA, and Herbalife. And again, a million thanks to them. So everyone, till next time, and please stay safe wherever you are. I'm Radin Raifidin, signing off. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.